So hello everyone, and welcome to our first ever LinkedIn Live. I'm really happy to be hosting, and I hope everyone will find today's discussion quite valuable. So today we'll be talking about the importance of product teams, and as you can see, we have a guest speaker with us that we introduce a little later. We chose this topic because Storm 5 recently released a report that we found that only 14% of RetailTech's US-based startup had a product leader. We basically realized that during the pandemic, many retail techs quickly scaled to meet consumer demand. They only focused on establishing data and engineering teams, but now that the market is returning to normality, there is a gap in their team structures, which is a lack of product experts. With that being said, the stats are still showing that the number of product hires in retail tech and e-commerce companies to be low. So we wanted to explore why and see how product hires impact a business. If you have any questions during today's session, please do drop a comment and we'll make sure that we'll find time at the end. So obviously today I'm really thrilled that we can introduce Phillip Lindberg. He's Senior Vice President of Product at Starship Technologies. Phillip, thank you so much for your time. We're really exciting to have you joining us. Could you kind of tell us a little bit more about Starship in general and the role that you play in the business?
Sure, thank you, Ellis. It's very nice to be here. My day job is actually quite an interesting one, but it's evolved significantly over the time. So I joined Starship Technologies back in late 2017. At the time, it was a company that was trying to develop a way of moving things from A to B autonomously. Consider this to be a delivery. So it's a small delivery robot, and the goal was to really drive down the cost of delivery at the local level and to provide a sort of cleaner, emissions-free way of doing so. But at the time, as with all early stage tech companies, not all of it works. So part of my job coming in was to answer the question: if we build this, how will it serve the world? What is the product? How is it consumed? Why would a customer choose it over the other alternatives? Because there always is another alternative, including to do nothing. So the goal was a pretty straightforward one of initially finding product market fit for the delivery service. But as you go deeper into complex products, you realize that new things pop up. It's like a happy game of whack-a-mole, if you like. So first you get the customers excited, and then you have a fulfillment challenge. So you have to work on the seller side of the equation. Then you end up with volume, and you've got to work out how do we operationalize this. And then we have, the scaling challenges of building things like robots and supporting infrastructure. So the product portfolio grows out, and this should always happen in balance with the value that the business is creating. So today I sit on top of a product management function that has a number of product groups and a few product teams within each, and effectively they're looking at delighting the buyer, the end consumer. Enabling a new channel for sellers, merchants in and around neighborhoods, internal tools for operations, and increasingly supporting robot behavior and interaction with autonomous driving capabilities, to mention just a few.
Yeah, great, thank you. Obviously, as we're specialist retail tech recruiters and we talk with hiring managers every day about building out their teams, what do you think it takes to have a successful impact when it comes to product professional and making sure that you hire the right people, if that makes sense?
Well, I'll go back to your introduction on where the gap is and how a lot of early stage startups kind of get to a point where they've got relatively established teams, but they might not have product management skills in-house already. I think this is good and quite natural, up to a point, of course. Typically speaking, one of the founders will actually have a pretty strong product hat at a minimum, and in many cases, it can be more than one. So they're really carrying the torch for how you win the customer, how you keep them, and they also have an understanding about the technology and what's going to be used to kind of create this service. And because they're founders and they're grappling with finding fuel to grow the business, the working capital, they're also aware of getting the business to work. So they're naturally well positioned to be the product manager, not only the CEO of the company, but the CEO of the product, as the old axiom goes. So it's less of a concern. But once you get to a point where you need to start scaling yourself as a founder, then you're going to need people that you can lean on that will carry that torch with maybe a slightly more focus in an area that's really core to the business. So if you've got operational challenges or logistics challenges or fulfillment challenges, whatever it is, then you might bring in somebody to start taking care of that. And at some point, you'll have a relatively senior product management team, and as a CEO, you'll need to move on to something else. Then you'll probably bring in a head of product. And that's the role that I took. In my case, we didn't have a product organization. I was the first kind of PM, if you like. So you can always go that way too.
To look at it, of course. And when we're talking about skills, would you say when it comes to product professional, would you say that's soft or more important than technical skills?
It's definitely a balance. So if you come in soft and you have no hard, you're going to have a very hard time, of course. That said, if you come in as somebody who's actually a deep specialist and has worked quite recently as an individual contributor, you can have that disposition to kind of go in there and solve technical problems yourself if you have an engineering background, for example, or contractual problems yourself if you have a business development background, or whatever the issue is, depending on your background. So generally speaking, what we already need to see quite early on is a person who's got an absolute ravenous appetite for understanding the bigger picture that the product sits within, understanding that kind of fuller context, and is actually quite obsessed about some unsexy topics. And these are the ones that we need to be able to be comfortable with and understand the value of them. I've definitely had the privilege of working on some very innovative, kind of customer-facing technologies and services. And when you use them, it's very apparent that people with product development and R&D skills have been involved. But the stuff that you don't see also matters. The regulatory compliance. How are you handling your finances? Is that business model legal and valid for this particular market? And are we kind of reconciling our books in the right fashion? All these sorts of nitty-gritty things that at face value people don't want to touch typically, but when you don't do them, it's a bit like payroll. You don't get a thanks for making payroll as the leader of a company, but as soon as you don't, you hear about it. Product gaps are the same. So the person really needs to be broad in mindset, and the soft skills matter a lot too, because your primary tool is going to be sense making and influence. It's not line management and do as I say because I have the ideas. That's not going to work in a complex product organization.
Yeah, of course. And you mentioned obviously coming from different backgrounds. What would you say are the kind of main successful background in order to succeed as a project leader?
I think there's no one absolute discipline that anchors this. So I think it really is it's a professional working space that in principle is open to all, but there are some caveats there. So if the product is very technical, and for example doesn't have a consumer touch point, there might not be an application. And I'll use an example from Starship's portfolio. We have basically a product that's sole job is to automate the movement of all robots in a fleet. Right? It's a fleet orchestration product, and it's quite advanced and it's quite complicated, and quite a few people work on it. The end customer experiences it, but in a very indirect way, in the form of an ETA for a delivery. That's not a team that needs, for example, great product design skills, for example, or someone with that background. But it does require people with a very good understanding of data, analytics, certainly engineering. And if you've come from a logistics background and you understand systems and flow, this is vitally important. Those skills might not apply if we're talking about how do I excite somebody about what we're selling in our marketplace or in our consumer front end. There we might have somebody that's got a disposition towards customer experience, user experience, etc. But there's no hard and fast rules here. But the more technical it is, then we might bias the PM skill set towards engineering more so. If it's more experiential, it could be a little bit more design oriented. And if it's got a business focus, it could have a kind of a business analyst MBA kind of vibe to it. Yeah. But none of the people that you meet that are good at the job just wear one hat. They're kind of, they're not standing on a single pole. They've usually got an A-shaped skill set. So they've done this and that, or this and that and that. So they're slashers by nature.
And in terms of obviously your background, where did you start and how did you kind of fall into product?
Okay, so it's a good question, and I think we all find our own way, into the world of kind of product management and looking and caring about products in their kind of entirety, and the entirety is both the holistic view of them at this moment in time, and also how they perform over time, their life cycle. But my story started way back when I was a kid, and it was born out of my family garage, and specifically it was my dad's domain largely. Old two-stroke lawnmowers, car equipment. But specifically, there was this magical little biscuit tin. It was white with some sort of orange floral motif, something that some high-end biscuits came in. And inside it were leftover fastenings and couplings and screws and nuts and bolts. And whenever I had an idea and I'm like, I got to get this and this to fit together somehow, I'd go out to the shed and I would scrape through this thing. And every time, and it would take some time, I would find something that I could use. And what it told me was that there's a way to do this. And if you're resourceful and persistent, you'll find a way. That kind of got me on the path of making stuff. And since then, I've always been interested in making. And the more that I make, the more that I care about how is this consumed? How is it enjoyed? How does it deliver benefit? What's its role in society? How does it die? All those sorts of big important questions.
So you were really made for it, basically.
I sort of was, but it doesn't actually occur to you until quite, I can sit here now and reflect on it. But back then as a 7 or 8 year old in the garage, I wasn't sitting there going, my life goal is to work in product management. That's not the way there. But I discovered through specialist education in product design and in industrial design that I always cared about the things that were outside of the obvious and on the edges of where the product existed, and that was not necessarily that common in my peers at the time. So I noticed there was something up. I thought maybe I was broken. This turns out that I cared more about breadth than depth sometimes. And don't get me wrong, depth matters.
And talking a bit more about obviously the retail tech industry, do you feel that there is kind of anything that has changed and kind of developed within the years comparing to maybe a few years back? What is happening now? What are the kind of main developments within product leaders, would you say?
Okay, so I think one of the most important soft skills of any PM and any real expert is to say things like, I don't know and I need help. And I say them quite often, and people in my team say them to each other and to me. I don't have a strong history in e-commerce per se. I've worked in companies that have been good at it, but I've been building the products that have been sold through that channel, which is a different thing. But during my time at Starship, where we've kind of created a direct-to-consumer service where you can order what you want to have it delivered on demand by an autonomous delivery robot. I've had to learn certain things about the grocery business, the postal business, etc. And at least what I'm seeing there, and this is probably pretty obvious to most people, is that the customer promise is getting extreme. That's probably the first thing that I've noticed. In fact, unsustainably extreme, I would have to say, which is you can basically, it's feeding something that's inherent in people, which is and I'm judging myself and probably a few other people as well, it's our inability to delay gratification, and web services that are connected directly or indirectly to e-com are getting very good at convincing us that this thing that you didn't know existed 2 minutes ago, you can no longer live without, and it needs to be in your possession in the next 7 minutes. So that's an extreme example, but we see that in the grocery space with quick commerce. So, ultra rapid delivery is one thing. The other thing that's very strong is that you can buy online with ease and a very low level of commitment. And we see this in the fast fashion business, which is, get what you need into the house, try it on, whatever you don't like, send it back. And it's a lovely idea that's actually fraught with challenges that we're all going to need to solve together. Those are, I think, a couple of the bigger issues. But at the end of the day, there's only one that matters right now, and that's how well are we using the Earth's resources, especially when it comes to the issue related to climate change. So I'm always encouraging everyone I work with to focus on that issue, because everything else is secondary if we torch the planet in our pursuit of convincing people to buy and consume more, which I don't think is ideal, to say the least.
Yeah. Yeah, no, 100%. And I think that that's really related to the pandemic as well, because you mentioned, consumer being much more demanding and wanted goods in a faster way, in a more efficient way, and all of that. And I think, what kind of the pandemic has showed us is that the last mile delivery businesses are going, growing and kind of scaling. And I think that's quite interesting to see that industry, doing things in that way, if that makes sense. What do you think are going to be the kind of next challenges in your industry when it comes to the last mile delivery space, for example, this year or even next year?
Yeah, so it's all about, so the convenience is an easy promise to make. And if you're compelling enough and you can meet the right kind of people who will capitalize your business and give you a runway to go after it, you can make all kinds of crazy promises. The question, though, is can you offer that convenience in a way that's both affordable and sustainable, right? And that's on the economic side. And we know that these numbers don't add up right now for what a lot of businesses are experimenting around. And I love the experimentation. Where I get a little bit uncomfortable is that I don't like to see things scaled when people don't have line of sight to how to solve the fundamental problems. I think that's a little bit reckless because it uses a lot of resources, and it kind of skews the market. The second thing is how do we do these in a way that's both socially and environmentally sustainable? A lot of customer promises that are being made on behalf of many e-commerce platforms and the partners that serve, especially their last mile delivery needs, are based on. I apologize. I should know better than that. Is based on the on a premise that there's a person willing to work for a relatively low sum of money, in many cases below a living wage, and provide their own mode of transport, which in many cases is a non-modern automobile or scooter that's being used quite excessively to drive around the neighborhood. So we have this kind of three-legged problem here, where the business model might not be sustainable. The affiliated delivery courier model might not be sustainable, and then the customer promise is so aggressive that it's audacious. It's like you can have it in 10 minutes, and it's like, hang on, I'm sitting here right now. How much stuff is within 10 minutes of me? That's a crazy concept, and these problems need to be solved in a way where we can have convenience ethically and we can have convenience sustainably.
Great. Okay. And another kind of topic that I wanted to raise is, obviously this year it's been everywhere, the kind of remote working and how you feel about having efficient product teams in a kind of remote way. What's your thoughts on that?
Probably going to fall into the bucket of unpopular people right now, but I'll try to qualify it because I'm not dogmatic on many things, and work from home is one of those things that I've always practiced, at least for the last 10 plus years. Typically, my work from home day was a Friday, and that was the day where I could kind of clear the week, get on top of my own individual tasks, and then set up the week ahead. Obviously, the pandemic changed things, and we did what we had to do, and it's been awesome for the people that could work remotely. But we have to remember that a lot of people add value to society and the world by going out there and doing actual stuff, and they don't have that luxury. So we're actually talking about a subset of people who work a lot through computers, right, and who sit down a lot. But when it comes to the life cycle of a company, this is where I have a particular worldview that not everyone's going to dig, and there's certainly going to be exceptions. When it's very early stage, it's so important that the team is eyeball to eyeball, sharing. I know it's a cliche, but the water cooler moments. It's the stuff that you overhear between two teams, and it's like, you're doing what? That's an interesting idea, but the implications of that would be, oh yeah. And then all of a sudden, this thing starts to take on a whole new set of dimensions that could be introducing risk or opening up opportunity, or both. And you just don't get them when you're not sitting together and grinding it out. And then in particular, when there's hardware involved, well, I'm not going to go too much into detail because it's self-evident, but doing hardware remotely is difficult.
Yeah. No, and I think I completely agree. Product leaders are kind of doing this gap between two teams, and it would be really hard and less efficient in a way to be fully remote. So it's very interesting. We're talking about it as a team as well, that you need to be physically present in order to make the magic happen, let's say.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah.
But I want to just make sure that I don't alienate myself completely from the audience. That's a general disposition, right? And that's the position I still hold for Starship today, where we would like to see people coming back to the office at least 3 days a week, and having those 3 days when they're kind of anchored in with their product team. It's a pragmatic stepping stone, maybe towards 4 days a week. Who knows?
And finding that balance.
That's right, yeah. But if you've got an early stage team that's only got, maybe less than 15 people in it, and it's a pure software business, and you've got a couple of strong leaders in there that are social chameleons through digital channels, and we've all met these people. They might not necessarily be the life of the party in a face-to-face conversation, but when you see them writing in old school IRC or in Slack, you're like, damn, you are witty, you are sharp, you're sarcastic. And but you realize these people can actually really converse quite deeply. I think there's cases to be made for certain teams being able to pull it off. So it's really on a case-by-case basis. But the more complex and the more components to the service and the more sub-products in the portfolio, I think the harder it gets in the early stages. As the company matures, I think it gets easier. You end up with critical mass and a little bit of duplication of skill, which kind of gives a bit more air cover to individuals. It's too raw in the early days.
Makes sense. And obviously, as someone that has grown product functions, and hired lots of different teams, do you have kind of any tips for the audience, or for maybe businesses that are starting to scale and grow product leaders?
I can only share what I'm looking for personally, and I can't say it's right for everyone. But generally speaking, it seems to work, and the teams that I've had, that I've been a member of in the past that have been special, have had these sort of characteristics, and the teams that I've been building that have performed the best have been built around these sort of aspirational characteristics. So the kind of leader that you're looking for is somebody who actually isn't the ideas person. This might sound counterintuitive, where it's like, hang on, doesn't the product manager tell everyone else what to do? And I'm like, And it's a good thing to kind of screen for within the first 15 minutes of an interview. If you've got this thing scheduled for an hour, if you can determine whether that person is a director or an enabler very quickly, you'll be able to work out whether you can have half an hour of your morning back, because you don't need to stay on that call, in my opinion. What I'm looking for from a product manager is somebody who's there to actually enable a team through providing maximum broad context and then helping the team focus, and not the person who's there to sort of individually drive their own mandate. They nurture the team's mandate, but it's most important that they kind of lead a team that can self-propel.
Yeah, and I remember when we initially spoke, you mentioned the holistic approach about good product people, let's say. Do you want to kind of tell us a bit more on your views on being holistic and having that sort of approach in product?
Yeah, it's I think it probably the easiest way to bookend it is what insights do we have that are going to give us the fuel and the seeds that we need to generate ideas that may be valuable? And I use the term "may be valuable" because we don't know. We have ideas, and I've been unpopular with a couple of bosses in the past when I indicate that, look, half my ideas are wrong. I'll be the first to admit that. But what I do right, and what the teams do right that I work with, is that we discover this quite quickly. And there's a lot of value in understanding that's not the path. And quite often, there's a little nugget to the side of what you thought would be a good idea that you then go and mine for and realize, oh, that's the thing that people care about more. So it's about kind of good discovery work and knowing how to find insights. I think that's a really important skill, and bringing those into a truly cross-functional team. We're kind of talking about two concepts here. There's the product manager, which is a role and a responsibility, and as I always say, not a privilege. It's a hard job, and it's one of servitude, not of autocracy.
Yeah.
And then everyone's quite familiar, at least in the technological space, with the concept of how we build technological products, especially when software is involved. And we can talk about Agile and Scrumban and all these kinds of methodologies and what kind of skill sets you'll need. Those are important too. And the product manager plays a role in that equation. But then past it, where I like to see product managers being really, really diligent is they should have the most comprehensive view of what the definition of done is, and are constantly pulling that into the team to remind them it's not about shipping on time, and it's not about being feature complete, and it's not about passing all the test cases. Those all need to happen, of course, but it's actually about the thing that we're trying to get done here, the impact we're trying to have in the world. So if we're talking about an e-commerce case, it might be launching a new market or growing something from 100,000 a day to 120,000 a day within a fixed market. It's getting that outcome that you seek, as opposed to falling for the trap of just getting work done, or what we might call outputs or throughputs.
And in terms of obviously thinking about the research, that we kind of mentioned at the beginning, saying that a lot of product leaders are lacking within businesses, how would you say that product management is necessary in retail tech?
I think I think it goes back to my statements earlier around a lot of the trends in e-commerce are, well, this might sound harsh, but they're built on unsustainable practices, right?
Yeah.
Like if you start to put a price on e-commerce returns, or if you start putting a price on the true cost of delivery, or a carbon tax on a gig economy platform delivery service, the economics of it change. And these things actually are real right now. Those costs are being incurred and they're being borne by somebody. So I'd say it's more important than ever to have somebody who's looking at the key dimensions of the product. Is the customer happy, and are they going to stay happy? Are they going to stay loyal to this? Are we the best are we the best solution for them? That always matters, and that's kind of that's an easy thing to understand and get excited about. And then the question is the technological approach we're taking, is it right? Is it feasible? Is it going to be able to scale? Are the unit economics in check? And then ultimately, at the end of the day, after we've delighted a customer, they've paid us for their service, we've built this thing, does it actually work for our business? Is there any money left over? And there's a lot of businesses out there right now. We have this kind of running joke inside Starship, because we're kind of in the on-demand delivery space. It looks like dumpsters that people are just pouring cash into. We've seen through investment discussions where there's companies out there that are literally paying more than $100 per delivery, right? That's what they're paying for a customer who in return pays $2 or $3. So the losses are huge. And you start scaling that, it's quite incredible. So
it is.
Yeah, product management is about pulling all these strings together and having it work over time.
Great. Thank you for that. So we can reply to actually one question from the audience, because we have a couple of minutes left, which one of them was, at what stage should be a CEO invest in hiring for product? Okay,
so I think it's a good question. There's plenty of literature out there that's written from the perspective that's largely, I think, experiential and anecdotal. Some of it I agree with, and some of it is kind of, I think, less proven. But generally speaking, when you get to the point where you've got quite a strong engineering foothold, you have a good sense of instrumentation in your service, and you have data coming in, but you're not quite sure if you've found product market fit. that's always a good time to bring somebody in who's going to kind of bring that objectivity and that critical thinking. Because one of the things about good product managers is that they wear kind of two hats at the same time. One of them is one that is about deep passion for the mission and the vision for the company and what it's trying to do in the world. But on the other side, it's this kind of it's this critical thinking about what needs to be true for this to kind of really take off, and are those things in place? And quite often when there's a CEO involved, especially if it's a CEO founder, there's a huge optimism bias that can kind of skew the thinking, and they kind of need this kind of counterweight. So I'd say, just to kind of give it a number, something in the order of when you've got 2 or 3 engineering teams that are kind of off to the races, you might have a product owner, they might be self-managing their projects, but the things aren't really coming together as a whole. And the teams are starting to indicate, yeah, we've got some traction here, but they don't really know what to do next. That's a good point. But classically, it's around taking product market fit to the next level or building out product market fit. Sometimes in, for example, 2-sided services, you've got the customer hooked, but the seller side ain't on board. And product market fit needs to account for both sides of a marketplace in that regard.
Great, thank you. I guess the last question that we'll be replying to today will be, what does the future of last mile delivery look like for you?
Okay, so that's kind of an easy one. So whoever, I'm only seeing anonymous LinkedIn users, so I'm grateful for the less probing question. Logistics at every level needs to become emissions free, right? And that's not really anything that we need to debate right here. We need to kind of remove gigatons of CO2 emissions from the transportation of goods. As a species, we're so hooked on convenience that we don't realize just how much damage it's doing. So cleaning up shipping and electrification of transport as a land-based activity is really important. When it comes to last mile, this is where Starship is positioned. Where we're a last mile autonomous logistics solution that's able to do deliveries that are emission free, and we're able to do that without the green premium. And by that I mean customers don't need to pay more, and in many cases what they pay is less than it costs them to do it themselves, like get in your car, go to the store, do the shopping and come back. So I think this the future is about making it clean and then making the convenience actually sustainable, and that driving sustainable business models. We can't keep doing what we're doing right now. It's not going to work.
Yeah, no, of course. Amazing.
It's not going to work out well.
Yeah, we need to be conscious as well and play the right way. Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Phillip, for speaking with us today, and thank you everyone for joining this live. Of course, reach out if you're looking to grow your product team, and we're looking forward for our next LinkedIn Live. So thank you so much again, Phillip, and see you all very soon.